Hello, everyone, and glad to be back with you again. And today we're going to go through a new unit, and this unit is called Establish and Maintain a Work, Health, and Safety System. And it's an exciting webinar, and it's an exciting topic. This will enable you to work in an environment and understand what it is that you need to know and need to have for your safety in any environment that you're working in your different workplaces. Right now, I'm going to start taking you through some of the PowerPoints that I prepared for you. And let's just enjoy this together. All right, so here we're going to start sharing you with that PowerPoint. And as we fly through this, I just encourage you to start collecting your, have your paper handy, a pen handy, and we have your LMS open. And with that LMS, you're gonna be going through your assessment 1, assessment 2, assessment 3. So have these things open right in front of you so that as we begin to nail it, you can jot some notes and write some few things that you need to have there so that you can remember what you're saying. Right, so this unit has got 3 assessments. The first assessment is a quiz, right? So the first assessment is a quiz, and we'll discuss that more. But right now, I just want to tell you what our purpose is. My purpose really is to sort of break down these assessments for you, and let you know what you need to do, what you need to have for you to successfully answer the questions that are in here. Okay, let's go. So how will this run? Like I said, have a pen and paper ready, have your assessments open ready, and as we go through, take some notes, and also, there are a lot of fact sheets in here. There's some facts, some templates that you need to have. You will see this on your LMS, and I will show you so that when you go through this, all of us, we can be able to understand what I'm talking about. Right. What's the next thing that we need to have here? How will this session run? How this session run is, I will explain to you what each assessment requires, and also maybe just show you some bit of concepts and models for you to be able to clearly grasp what is required and what this whole session is all about and what the topic is trying to teach us and what we can learn from it. Right, so that's how this will run. How can I get most of this webinar? Well, you know, on your unit, when you go there, there are worksheets, there are examples that you need to be reading, there are fact sheets, there's information that you need to get hold of that is on the LMS. And so that then when you actually understand what that information says, we've read some of the booklets that are attached there that can enable you to understand and follow easily what we're talking about. So what happens after the webinar? Well, you guessed it. You're doing the assignment after the webinar. And look, if there's something that you don't understand, just give us a ring and drop us an email. Our address and email addresses and the phone numbers are right at the end of this webinar. We shall get them out to you. Let's get started. Let's get started. Okay, so assessment overview. Like I mentioned before, assessment 1 is an online quiz, right? For you to successfully answer this quiz, I would suggest you go to the website called Safe Work Australia. Safe Work Australia. Or one of the things you can do is you can go onto this unit, which will show you the stuff that you need to read there. I'm just going to the unit, so they can show you what you need to read to successfully answer that. So here, as you can see on your unit, let's see, are you seeing that on the unit there? Right, hopefully able to see on your unit, there is Work Health Safety Acts, Work Health Safety Regulations, fact sheets, and templates. So if you are able to view these and open those ones for your understanding, that will make it very much easier. Okay, so make sure you go to that website, make sure you read the resources that are on the LMS, get some information there, familiarize yourself with what is WH&S, with OHS, familiarize yourself with that act right? Or the regulations, the requirements. Because on the online quiz, these are the things they're talking about. These are the things they're asking you to say, you know, what is the act? What does the act say? So some that you're gonna go read through the resources for you to answer this successfully. Right, okay, let's see what else you need to have there. And the next thing is, the next assessment is a short answer. That's assessment 2. Assessment 2 is a short answer, and I'll just want to take you through there so you can have a look. We can all understand what this short answer is. So there you go, right? Assessment 2. You got short answers like, you know, questions like, what is meant by due diligence, right? And how does it relate to your role as a workplace manager? So in this instance, we are assuming you are a workplace manager and you're going to do due diligence. We'll discuss what is due diligence and I will sort of explain to you what it is, but I just want you to familiarize with the questions that are in there. And question number 2 will be, list 4 employers' legal obligations. And again, if you go to the website that I spoke about, Safe Work Australia, if you read the resources that are in here, this question will be much easier for you to answer. And when you answer these questions, yes, you can Google, but do not copy and paste. Read what's on, use Google as a research tool, right? And see what they say, go to different websites and find out, and then put this in your own words. We want to hear your understanding of the legal obligations. We want to understand, we want to see, having written in your own words. Now, some of you might just give us one-word answer or two words. No, that's not an explanation. Give as much detail. Imagine you're explaining this to somebody who doesn't know. Don't explain this to us to, like as you say, well, you're talking to an expert. You are not talking to an expert. Put yourself in a position where you're talking to somebody who's very ignorant about workplace safety. You're talking to somebody who has no idea what WH&S is, and you have to explain it to them. You have to explain the regulations to them. You have to explain the legal obligations. And how would you do that? How much time would you take? What sort of information would you use? If you had employed, you hired someone in your workplace and you're trying to explain to them, for instance, number 4, 5 reasons why it is important to implement comprehensive WH&S system. So give us as much detail as you can, do as much research as possible, and we want it written in your own words. Do not be worried that, well, my English is not that good, my explanation is not that good. No, it is about you understanding and giving us the concepts and just giving us from your own understanding and in your own words. And they ask, for instance, question number 7, what are the 2 types of training every manager should consider when assessing WH&S training needs? List 3 examples or factors to consider for each type. What is the type of training required by law? What does the law state? What we should have? And then what's the type of training specific to the work? So you have the regulated training that an organization must have in place. And then you have another training that is specific to the work. If you're a mechanic, probably you work in a manufacturing environment or work in the food industry. What sort of training would you get in the food industry regarding work, health, and safety in your job? The whole idea here is why this unit is very important, and also why the regulations stipulate that this should be trained in workplaces, because we want to keep you safe. We want to keep you alive. We want to reduce the injuries at work. All those accidents that either claim people's lives or people's limbs. And so we want you to enjoy your workplace. We want there to be a harmonious working environment that you look forward to, a healthy environment, whether it being air pollution or inhaling some certain gases during the workplace. We want you to be aware of your surroundings and maintain a clean and healthy place. And you got questions like number 9, list 4 reasons why it is important to investigate and respond promptly to WH&S issues that are brought to you. Very simple. Why is it important to report promptly, when they're brought to you? what advantages there, what benefits are there, and what should be the company's concern when an issue has been brought to management and to you as the manager regarding WH&S. Again, regarding, remember, we are watching over people's lives, and we want to make sure that they leave the workplace in a healthy environment and in a healthy state. And by the time they retire, you do not want anyone to say, well, I worked in such and such a place over so many years. I was exposed to this type of gases. I was exposed to this kind of metallic noise, all those kind of pollution that might affect you when you get into your old age. So that's assessment number 2, short answers, short questions, but hey, yes, I know some of you want to be brief, but explain thoroughly. Like I mentioned before, you're talking to somebody who doesn't know, you're not talking to experts, you're trying to educate someone what would be the best deal. Now, let's go and see what assessment 3 has for us. And what is it that we need to do to succeed in assessment 3? Right, let's see if we share that with you. Let's go and share assessment 3. That was, let's see this one here. That's assessment 3. So in assessment 3, what are they asking? It's a portfolio. Now, in this portfolio, what are you required to do? You've got to put together a portfolio of useful resources, contacts, and information related to the management of WH&S in the workplace. So what will this portfolio consist of? It will consist of, you got the useful contacts, examples of WH&S policies and procedures in your workplace statement. So if you are not working at the moment and you say, Fred, where can I get this policy? Go do a research of an organization of your choice and find out what are their WH&S policies. If you're working somewhere, every organization has these policies. Ask your HR manager, ask your boss. Well, if it's just you and the owner, ask the owner, say, hey, I'm doing an assignment at work and I need to collect a portfolio. What are our policies here? And in most companies that you might have, you're working for an international company, these policies are on the intranet of your organization. Go to your website, you'll probably find all these things in your organization. And safe work method statements, hazard identification checklists. Yes, there will be a lot of checklists there for identify hazards, risk assessment tools, templates and procedures. I will go with you and show you some of these assessment tools. WH&S resources. So here is a list of the things that make up your portfolio. And I can also understand that some of you have never had maybe sat in meetings in a WH&S committee. So of course, and we won't really hold this against you, but what we will be happy is for you to go out and research and find out what will third-party reports look like. For instance, here, what will a third-party report look like, and what will be a third-party report detail in the role of controlling risks, implementing emergencies and interims, and documenting what will be the evidence in regarding investigation of incidents and notifying WH&S regulatory methods. Like I mentioned, if you're not working right now, you could just choose an organization of your choice, go to their website, research what policies they have, and you can use those as part of your portfolio. Now, let's go to what are some of the things that I prepared for you, and so we can walk you through some of those points. We have covered that, and let's get into covered it. Now, due diligence, you remember on one of the questions that they ask is, what is due diligence? Now, when an organization is doing a due diligence, what are you doing? This is really an in-depth study of you're analyzing the market, you're looking at the different opportunities and the trend and the forecast, and you're also comparing, say, what is our competitive benchmark? So if you're doing due diligence of a particular product, or due diligence of your risk assessment, or due diligence about your organization, whatever you've been asked to do, right? So you look, first of all, look at the market. So, okay, what industry are we on? What's the market analysis? What are the opportunities? What are the trends? Within that industry, could be to do jewelry, perfume, and so what are the regulatory framework? You know, how are we regulated? What are the requirements that are needed by law that we should have? And you look and say, who are my competitors, right? Who are the other guys in the game? You know, if I'm selling clothes, who are the men's clothes or ladies' clothes? Who are you competing with? Who are the other people in the industry? How much are they selling these goods? And how much worth is that industry? So you could say, for instance, the jewelry industry could be worth $4 billion. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that, we're saying in Australia, people spend in excess of $4 billion per annum to buy jewelry. So that's what we mean when you say the industry is worth this amount of money. So you look and say, well, people are prepared to spend 4 billion, that's 24 million people in Australia spending 4 billion worth of money per annum buying jewelry. What, you know, these are rings and earrings and necklaces, you know, diamond rings for weddings, for presents and Valentines and birthdays. And we're saying the amount of money that is spent on that particular product is what we say. How much do people spend, you know, in general for that particular product? And then we look at the technology. You assess the technology within that industry, the technology regarding the product that you're assessing, that you are investigating, and then you benchmark as well. Benchmark and identify the red flags. What are the things to watch out for? Is the technology antique? Is it how fast is changing this technology? For instance, I can give you an example of printers. Most companies these days do not buy printers, right? Every company has got printers. What do I mean that they don't buy? They hire them, they lease. Why? Because the technology is changing so fast. If they were to buy a printer, for instance, you buy a printer for, you know, let's give a round figure, 12,000, right? And you spend 12,000 today, you buy a printer, some companies spend even 50,000 buying a printer, if these are big organizations. And the lifespan for that printer will be written maybe 3-4 years. So 12 months later, new technologies come up, the new printers can email, the new printers can scan, the new printers can staple, the new printers can, you know, can punch and can save documents, and the new printers are connected to the server. When you know, 12 months, 6 months ago, you just spent 50 grand on a printer that does not communicate with your email. You've just, you spend that money on a printer that does not automatically staple. So companies have learned to say, well, look, why buy a printer? Because you spend 50,000 buying it cash, and now that new technology has come up, what do you do with it? Do you go throw it away? You can't throw it away. It doesn't even, and it's half of its lifespan. So then you are stuck with this tool that does not have the latest technology. So what do you do? Therefore, most companies have, you know, have seen fit that, well, it's better for them to lease and hire, such that then when technology changes, they can just go and upgrade, and that company will just give them the latest printer that's on the market. So when you're doing your due diligence, when you're buying even such kind of products or assets, that's the exercise that you do. So due diligence, it's an exercise of understanding where the industry is at and where it's going and where it's been, and then you look and say, what are the dangers here? So it's more like your mini SWOT analysis, and so that you can be aware of the risks and dangers, or also be aware of opportunities that might present themselves in the future. Then the decision that you make there is well researched, and the risks are well calculated, and whether some of those risks you can treat them or can't treat them, or mitigate, as you might want to use the word. You'll be so, well, this risk can mitigate. Is it one of those risks that you want to live with? Is it one of those risks that you want to give to a third party? And so again, what you do in the due diligence, remember, that's doing a market analysis, you're doing a competitive benchmarking, you're doing internal analysis within the organization. You say, you know, what capabilities do we have in this organization to get this thing done? What skills do we need? And how ready are we to actually meet the challenges of the future? And within that competitive benchmarking, you're looking at prices, you're looking at savings, and you're looking at if your gross sales, and you're also looking at your profit against competition. How much is somebody's making money, with your competitors, how much money are they making? It's something Woolies and Coles, they're constantly watching each other, looking when Coles releases their figures or Woolies release their figures, these are the first one to go and say, well, Woolies made so much, how far are we behind, or are we ahead of them? How did they make this money? What is it that we didn't do? And then management looks at these operational capabilities, financial strength, product portfolio, and how they control their quality. So that's due diligence in a nutshell. But again, like I said, feel free to do your due diligence in researching these matters. So it's a good word to learn due diligence. And as a student of diploma, advanced diploma that you are, due diligence is something that you must do each time, even when you're doing your assessment, even before you submit your assessment, just do some due diligence. Have I done everything that's required of me? Next slide, risk management. So as you'll be aware, in these assessments, you're talking about identifying risks, assessing risks, because in your work, health and safety management, you need to assess the risk of doing something, risk of not doing something. And you'll be thinking, well, there are quite huge risks in not doing the right thing in work health and safety, because some of those risks are really tied to the lives of the people that work for you. So when you look at this slide, you say there's risk identification. You need to identify what are the risks in this job? What are the risks of using this equipment or machinery? Identify the risks in the workplace, identify the risk in that particular job that the person does, and then identify the inventory of your assets, and you look and say, and you prioritize. So, well, this asset, it could be a machinery equipment that we have, assess the risk of them, what are the dangers? What are the things that could go wrong at any time? And these things that could go wrong, when you assess, when they go wrong, how big an impact are they going to have on your workplace, on your employees, and on your bottom line, which is your financial profit. And then you classify, say, well, this risk, if this happens, that's a showstopper. That means you might have to shut down, maybe like fire. And there are certain risks that are, you might say, negligible, nothing stops, you continue working, you can deal with it. And there's some risks, again, that might have a moderate impact, but they're rare. So you look at a risk and say, well, these are the risks that I have. You look at them and say, how likely are these risks? How likely are they to happen? And how often might they happen? And so you look at the regularity of those risks being having to come. So if they're very regular, you think this might happen often, then you need to take note and say, okay, when they happen often, what is the impact to the business? What is the impact to my processes and everything that I do? And then you prioritize them. You say, okay, and you say, well, risk number 1, number 2, number 3, higher priority. And there's some risks that may say, well, for instance, if you're running a factory, what is the risk of the roof collapsing on your workplace? You might say, well, it's very unlikely. What gives you that confidence? Well, it's a good structure for building. It's unlikely that's happening because the building has been assessed and been approved. So, the chance of your roof collapsing, very highly unlikely. And that risk, you will put it as number 1. Don't probably put it as lowest. And is there something you want to treat? Do you want something you want to check? Yes, building inspection will cover that. And that's how you treat the risk. When you say treat the risk, you say, well, how do you mitigate or how do you ensure you've actually covered it, looked at it and say, this is how I'm going to protect myself from this danger taking place, from this hazard affecting me. And there's some hazards that maybe there is no way of treating them, right? So you say, do I avoid them? Some of the risks are avoidable, some they are unavoidable. If they are unavoidable, then you're going to look and say, what is it that I can do to reduce the impact, to reduce the danger, to reduce, the consequences of what might happen? So then you go to a risk assessment. This is what we're talking about. You assess the risk, identify vulnerabilities between assets and threats. You identify and quantify asset exposure. How exposed are we into this danger? And then go to risk control. How am I going to control this risk? What is my selected strategy? For instance, if you buy a car, there's a risk of you having an accident. And if you got money from the bank to buy the car, they'll know that that risk is likely to happen. It might happen, and it will happen at some point, but they don't know when it's going to happen. It might not happen. The car might not be stolen. The car might not be involved in an accident, right? For the life of the loan, maybe even for the life of the car. But what we're saying is, how likely is it to happen? Very likely. Every day you go on the road, it's likely to happen. But then how do you mitigate yourself against that risk, against the exposure? That when you have an accident, you're going to have to fix the car, and where are you going to get the money? So what you do, you pass on that risk to a third party by getting insurance. So you buy insurance to say, hey, I know there's a likelihood of me being involved in an accident, and therefore, if that does happen, the amount of money I paid on the insurance, I've insured this car for $20,000. The $20,000 will cover the cost of repairs to me or to somebody that I might hit. So that is now you've looked and say, this is how I'm going really to protect myself. And some of those risks that you control, say maybe in a workplace, there might be very noise pollution. How do you control that risk? You have seen some workers working, putting on, covering their ears, protecting their ears from the sound. And maybe also if they're working in a very bright place, they might be wearing some, shades to reduce the impact of the sun or the heat that's coming through them. So that's sort of controlling them. Now, depending on your workplace that you might be choosing to make a portfolio or where you might want to explain to us how you do it, it could be different depending on the job that you do. So you select a strategy of how you're going to control those risks, and then you justify those controls. Why have you chosen this? And once you've chosen that, then you implement them. So this is your risk management. Now, I'm going to help you with some hazard identification methods. How would you as a manager identify the hazards at work? So you are at the center here, right? The red hazard identification. And then you look at employees, they give you feedback. They might have complaints about certain things. And that feedback, use those points to actually identify and say, wow, okay, I was not aware that this is causing a problem. I was not aware that you sitting in this chair in this direction or whatever is causing you a backache. I was not aware that, maybe the height of the table or the way you stand or whatever the job they do. So getting the feedback and complaints from there, getting suggestions from the people that are actually using the equipment helps you identify some of these hazards that you might not be aware of, or some of the hazards that might not be so clear. And you can also have formal safety audits. There are organizations, if you go to the websites, Safe Work Australia, there's ways there you can have your place audited for safety, and they can make suggestions of how you can protect yourself and your workers from those hazards. And they can pinpoint areas of concern. And workplace inspections as well, and people might observe, inspectors might observe to say, well, this place, this is a hazard. And you might be thinking, well, it's nice to have this desk here, it's nice to have these wires crossing this room. But when inspections come and say, well, look, what if somebody trips? Incident investigations, again, it's a way of identifying, hazards. Historical safety records from your work. You might also look at those stats and say, well, we had 7 people injured last year using this equipment, or we had 3 people, fall down, trip in the kitchen when the floors were wet. And that will tell you that, well, your floor is very slippery and you need to do something about it. Maybe more signage, or maybe you need to change the floor lining, or you need to put more signs for people to be aware. And you also have a safety committee recommendations. So hazard identification methods, use your employees, use the complaints, the suggestions, audits, observations, investigate the incidents that happen at work, look at your historical records, and take advantage of the workplace committee. Hierarchy of control, what do we mean by this? So we are saying here, right, when you are at work in a workplace, what is it that you do? Because you want to protect the worker, right? So factories and workplaces, even people that work on the road, they've got protective clothing, right? This is personal protective equipment. If you're working exposed to the sun, people have got sunglasses, they put lotion, you know, maybe some even vests that reflect that they're working in a public place, so you can be aware you don't walk into them or you don't drive into them. So that is protecting them from the hazards that could happen, you know, external hazards outside their control. And when you identify these hazards, what is it again you can do? Like you said, identify a hazard. Some of it might be covered through protective clothing. Administrative controls, change the way people work. Maybe it could be the way you sit in a chair. Maybe it could be the way people lift things. Right? You're lifting that something in a different way, and you identify there's a hazard going to cause you back pain in the future. Not now, maybe because you're still young, but hey, as you get older, wear and tear increases, and so you might have to change the way you lift things, or change the way you do things, the way you operate, and so that you can avoid those hazards. And when you identify the hazards, another way of controlling is you might isolate people from the hazard, especially those are called engineering controls. You know, isolate people from the hazard. That means people now, you put them to work in a place which is less hazardous. You put them to work in a place where that hazard does not exist. Substitution, replace the hazard. It could be using a particular equipment and maybe using something in the kitchen, or you know, could be some sharp knives and that might be using, and we're thinking, well, there's a danger of it falling on the ground or falling on your legs. So, well, replace the hazard. Find something else. Substitute that equipment which is dangerous with something that is safe. That's all what we're saying. Substitute the dangerous equipment with the safe equipment. That is if you can isolate the person from the danger. Maybe the person needs to be using that equipment, and so you're going to have to build in some controls, building something that makes that equipment safe to use. And of course, we wish we could eliminate, physically remove the hazard. If that were possible, everybody would just walk into a workplace and say, that wire is dangerous, this thing is dangerous, this thing hazardous, eliminate it. But most times, it might not be possible to remove the hazard, right? So when you can't remove the hazard, what do? You substitute it, right? And if you can substitute it, see whether you can isolate people from that hazard and maybe change the way the job is done. And when you look at this here, hazard identification tool. This tool helps us and helps the employer to identify some of the hazards that might not be so clear. So, for instance, as you can see from this circle here, when you see it, for instance, electrical, when you see this sign, that means it's electrical. There's electricity there, electrical hazard, right? And with this sign in a workplace tells you there's a pressure hazard. And here, high temperatures, right? Could be working in a boiler. And here, this one is a sign of chemical. There's a chemical hazards, biological hazards, radiation. Maybe you're working in a nuclear plant, which, you know, hopefully you don't have to. But people that work there, these are the signs. Or if you're driving through a nuclear zone, you see this sign that there's a danger of radiation. Sound pollution. You know, when you see this, gravity, right? There's this sign that there's a gravity hazard here. And motion, that means the equipment is moving, or wherever you are, it may be a moving floor, and they're saying, be careful, the hazard that exists here is to do with motion. The hazard that exists here is mechanical. The hazard that exists here is electrical. The hazard that exists here is pressure. So hazard is a condition of action that has the potential for an unplanned release or of unwanted contact with energy source. And they may result in harm or injury to people, property or in the environment. So they are telling you that the hazard now is a conditional action that is the potential to release an unwanted danger. In a much more bigger version, much more clearer, and so these are the existing hazards these are the hazards that exist in most workplaces. Not everywhere. For instance, if you're working in an office environment, you might not have any of these electrical or mechanical, hazards and so forth, or biological. Your hazards might be maybe tripping over wires in the office, maybe worn carpets, your heels might get caught in that carpet, or maybe walking to a chair. So these are more, into workplace, engineering and industrial facilities. Let's talk of risk assessment matrix. Yes, it's one of those tools that you would use to say, like we discussed, if you identify a hazard, the next thing then we're going to look and say, how frequent is this hazard? How frequent is it likely to happen? And what is the probability? So the frequency of occurrence and the catastrophe is say 1A. How catastrophic will this be? Right. Is it very catastrophic, where you want to put in a great danger? Or you may say critical, serious, or minor. Yes, there are some occurrences of a hazard which you say, well, it's minor, negligible. And the frequency of certain hazards happening, certain dangers occurring, are remote, like we spoke about a roof collapsing. It's very remote, unless maybe there's a hurricane taking place or the place is getting flooded. And there's some others that are like improbable. So we might say, what are the chances of me being hit by lightning sitting in the office? Improbable. How will that happen? So it's not even something that we might consider. If it was brought forward, we'll say, well, that's improbable. It might not happen. And so this risk assessment enables you to sort of put all the risks, the occurrences, the criticality, the seriousness, and the catastrophe levels of them happening. So here, where red is unacceptable, it's like, no, the catastrophic level is unacceptable. And here it's high, and as you can see, this color will be medium, and they say, well, it's very low. Chances of lightning hitting me in the office, non-existent, low, and so obviously, if it happens, it's not to be catastrophic. But however, you'll be saying, well, minor chances, not likely to happen. Here again, you can use another matrix in a different format where your risk is equal to probability multiplied by consequence. So you take the numbers from the previous side and say, well, I put this at number 3, for instance, if it's a major one, and you say, okay, these are the consequences. It's a major consequence, or it's moderate, or it's minor, and so the impact, high. Probability might be low, or the occurrence is rare, and if it does happen, it's medium. So you'll be saying, with this risk that I'm taking, when you identify them, then we're going to plot them on a graph. What is the likelihood of them occurring, and when they do occur, what is the impact, and what will be the consequences. Let's look. Now, recapping, as we've mentioned, work health and safety is quite an important aspect of every workplace, and every manager in every situation should be able to be aware to protect their employees and to abide by the regulations that are stated here. And it used to be called WH&S, and now it has changed to WH&S. And you've got to be aware of your surroundings, educate your employees, educate the people that you work with about work health and safety, because it's for their benefit and it's for your benefit as well. So when you go from here, what you go from here is you go and start with a quiz. Like I said, the first thing is you got to go to your fact sheets. All right, let me see if I can take you back there again. Take to your fact sheets. You read there. Read the resources, Work Health and Safety Act. Read Work Health Safety Regulations. read the fact sheets and templates. So you don't have to, read all of it, memorize, but you have a grasp, get the main points of why health and safety is important. Look at the regulations. What does it say about employers? What are the requirements and the obligations of the employer? What are the obligations of the employee? What are the necessary things that you should have? How do you do your risk identification? And what is the risk assessment process? And why do you need to consider the level of severity of those risks? And what action can you take to protect your employees from those hazards? So you're going to use your hierarchy of control. You're going to look at what's, your risk control. How are you going to control those risks? Is this something that you can eliminate? Is this something that you can remove that danger from the people that are working for you? Or you can have maybe to build in some controls, some measures that will protect your workers from that danger. Yeah, so when you go, what happens from here? Once you finish reading, if you've got any concerns, anything that you're worrying you, hey, call the team, 1300-050-589, or email us at student_support@fceducationgroup.com. Yeah, like I said, my name is Fred. Thanks for watching, and thanks for being with me. And I really enjoyed this webinar. I'll catch you in the next one. In the meantime, enjoy your work and celebrate your studies. Fantastic. Thank you.